Ladies and gentlemen, it's Ebro, Laura, and Rosenberg, and you may not know this person by sight, but if you don't, I want to give you a congratulations. You played yourself. Okay, but this is the great.
Wait. Hold on.
Here we go. Here we go.
What about
Now
now?
you know. That's Jimmy Jam.
Baby.
Of the famous duo Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, songwriter, producer, all the things.
Musician, everything.
Everything. Yeah. So you're here today because you're supporting your dad's book that is about you guys coming back together. It's called Deeper Blues.
Yep.
I did not know that you, as much as I've learned about you just in loving music and all of the great things you've done, I did not know that your dad was a blues musician.
Yep.
In Minneapolis. And tell us about this book, Deeper Blues.
So the story is when I was young, my dad basically, one day he just left. He went to work and never came back. And I was probably around, probably about 14, 15 years old at that point. And we basically were estranged. I started off playing, my first instrument was drums. And I basically played in my dad's band, like I was his drummer.
And was this called he went by Cornbread
He
Harris?
went by Cornbread at the time,
and
yeah.
You were in his band?
I was in the band,
okay.
Yeah. And so, because he never could keep a drummer. So the drummer kept not showing up, and his guitar player said, why don't you let your son drum? He knows all the parts. And we said, okay. So anyway, I did it, and everybody loved it. So that's how I kind of got started in music. And the only reason I switched to keyboards is because I met Terry Lewis back that same year, and he said, Jam, I don't need a drummer, I got a drummer, I need a keyboard player. I was like, okay, so I switched to keyboards.
Must be nice.
Yeah, so he just switch up. Let me try this. He said your dad plays, so you should be able to play. And that was the reason I switched to keyboards. So anyway, that was my thing. So it's a really long story, but we were estranged for like 50 years. Basically.
Wow.
And through a series of circumstances, we ended up doing Sounds of Blackness, which is our group from back in the day. We did a show with them at Paisley Park for the Billboard Awards. And when I was back there, I just thought I should call his manager, my dad's manager, just to make sure he's doing okay. And I gave him a call, and he said, yeah, do you want to meet with him? And I said, yeah, I'd actually like to, because I felt like after having my own kids and all that, I wanted to let him know that I didn't have any resentment or any sort of bitterness about him leaving, right? Because Terry, my partner, always says it's tough to criticize a boss if you haven't been a boss, because you just don't know what right. People go through. And I was like, it's tough for me to criticize my father without being a father. So that was the thing I realized.
Well, why did it take you that way, though? Because I could have thought it might have gone the other way, where you go, I love my kids so much. How could you have ever left me? Why did you?
And I went through that. No, I did. I definitely went through that period. But after, my kids are grown now. My son's 28, and I have boy-girl twins that are 24. So they're grown. And I just felt like I knew he was probably feeling the weight of, guilt on his shoulders, maybe. And I wanted to address that. The other thing that somebody had told me maybe a couple of years before that really resonated with me was my mom never really let my dad pursue music in the way that he wanted to. Because when he got married, he said, I'm going to give up music and just raise, our son and blah, blah, blah. But then he got some opportunities and he wanted to go out. And I remember they used to argue all the time about, I just want to go out and play this gig. And she would go, no, you said you were going to give up music. And in my mind, I'm going, give up music? That's crazy. I could never. That's crazy. So in my mind, I was like, I'm never getting married. I'm never having kids because I'm not going to have anything ever take music from me. So when I dropped out of high school, and I told my mom, I said, I'm going to pursue music. And she said, okay, as long as I see you really doing it. And I thought she was going to hit the roof when I said that. And probably 5 years later, we won our first Grammy for Producer of the Year. And my mom was my date that night. So she didn't get a chance to see me walk across the graduation stage, but she got to watch me walk across the Grammy stage.
And what Grammy was this for?
This was Producer of the Year. This was back in 1986. So it was Control. It was the body of work.
I just wanted the audience, because
the body
through
of
this story,
work.
I'm going to try to paint some of your discography and resume for people who don't know.
So what else was in
much?
What else was in '86? The Control album was '86.
Control album was '86. We had that. We had, if I'm not mistaken, I think we had Human League. I think we had SOS Band. I probably had Sherelle and Alexander O'Neal.
Okay.
Patty Austin, I think. I think we probably had like 5 or 6 records. They were all like really successful records. And so it's kind of for the body of work is how you get the Producer of the Year award. But later on, what somebody told me was, do you think that the reason your mom didn't stop you from pursuing your dream was because he had stopped your dad from pursuing his dream. And when somebody said that, I was like, oh man, yeah. He basically sacrificed his career or what he wanted to do to raise me so that I could have my career. So I felt like at that point it was time to try to not even make amends, but just tell him I appreciate everything that you've done for me, the musical talent that you've given me. And
that's
so
not
that was it.
excusing his inability to communicate at the time or
Right.
being estranged or any of that, because I'm sure you guys still had to work through that, right? Like, why didn't we talk, or why didn't we?
No, strangely enough, we didn't, because to me that had already been worked through in my mind. I didn't really care. It wasn't that I agreed with his decision. I just understood it.
And accepted it.
I understood it and accepted it. Yeah. And so for me, that was it. I was good with it. We didn't need to go back. I
So
just
what
wanted
year
to
was
go
the
forward.
what year was the getting back together?
That would have been 2023.
So this just happened.
This has just happened. 2022. I'm sorry, 2022. Yeah.
Well, and I think, as a black man at that time in America, what year are we talking?
when he
When
left.
your dad left.
Oh, we're talking 75.
75?
Yeah.
So that was the year I was born, by the way.
Okay.
So that's just to give the audience context.
How long
right?
ago was
How
it?
long ago it was, but
Yeah,
also just
50
what
years.
was going on, right? So you have someone who has a dream. The dream may not be fruitful, right?
Yeah.
Or has to really hunker down, sacrifice dream and just deal with being a father,
Yeah.
and who's also a black man in America with limited options.
That's right.
And limited outlets at
Yep.
that time, right? And
Yeah.
so, and many people also live through those struggles right now today, right? Like we see fathers, mothers too, but fathers who don't feel like they have outlets, or B, have anything to offer, and maybe are embarrassed about both.
Yeah.
Right? And,
Very
and,
true.
and that embarrassment also leads to sometimes fathers opting out of, and not being able to shoulder that embarrassment for not living up to what they want for themselves,
Yep.
and decide to make a decision like your father made. So I think, but that context I think is important, because it's not just like, oh, he just wanted to run out. I think there's more
No.
layers to
Oh, absolutely.
his shame, I'm sure, in some regard.
Well, yeah, I didn't ever feel like I think I felt like I was kind of in the way of him doing what he wanted to do, because I understood the passion of wanting to pursue music. I really understood what that was. I mean, I used to go to his gig. I mean, before I played with him, I'd go to the recording studio with him. I'd go to he played with a bunch of different bands. I'd always be at all the rehearsals. But that was like my musical training. I mean, that was like I grew up, in music like that. So I totally understood that. But I felt like I was not the blame necessarily, but I wasn't allowing him to do what he wanted to do.
I have a friend right now who's had much success in music, has a family, kids, and literally had to make a choice to be a commuter dad, to keep playing music, because that's how he makes his money.
Yeah.
But felt like the decision to walk away from music was going to literally kill him.
Yes.
And so I don't, obviously I'm not a musician or any artist like that, but I've heard that from artists, right? Creative types that feel like the not having the outlet could psychologically and emotionally burden them so heavy that it could make them not want to be present in life.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. But you know what? You get it because you are obviously passionate about music.
Yeah.
Not that you make music, but that you are the person that feeds the music to people.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? I was saying earlier today, we can make the music, but if nobody hears it, it's like the tree that's fallen in the forest that nobody
Right.
knows. It just fell down. So people like yourself that champion creators and put the music out there and let people know, oh man, this is something new. You should hear this, or you should really hear that. If somebody took that away from you and
Yeah.
said, you can't do that anymore,
Right.
that would be the same feeling.
Right,
it would be like, oh my God, like you're cutting a piece of yourself off, So
And so the book Deeper Blues is out now?
it's out now. It's available on Amazon, or the author of the book is a lady named Andrea Swinson. And you may know her she's written a lot of different books. The current Prince book that's out, celebrating the anniversary of Purple Rain, she did that book. She grew up in Minneapolis, so she's very much attached to the Minneapolis music scene. And she was a wonderful author. And the thing that she did that was so cool was when I came up and met my dad, we finally reunited, you know. The next day she texted me and she just said, every day I go, or not every day, but every Tuesday I go to your dad's house and we just kind of go through old archives and we go through different stuff. There's things he can't quite remember. Would you come on a Zoom with us and just talk, you know, and maybe talk us through some things?
Jog some memories.
Yeah. And so I did. I Zoomed in that Tuesday. And we've literally Zoomed every Tuesday for the next 2 years.
Wow.
And even when the book was done, we still, every Tuesday, we Zoom in and just talk and just tell
The Life
stories.
Songs
man.
and Salvation of Cornbread Harris, afterward by Jimmy Jam.
Yes.
So we also get in the book your version of you and your dad as well,
Yeah.
at least to some degree.
Yeah.
When
Well,
you guys reunited, did your dad express that he wanted to tell his story, that he actually wanted to write a book?
So he was already writing the book. The book was already in progress.
Okay.
Him and the author, Andrea Swinson, they had already started the process of doing it. And it actually, I'll tell you, it was interesting. So it's such a weird set of circumstances that kind of brought us together. But there was a group that Prince had called The Family. St. Paul Peterson was the leader of that group. St. Paul Peterson was actually the keyboard player that replaced me in the time when Prince fired us back in the day. So St. Paul was actually doing a session with my dad. My dad was doing a new song. And St. Paul just DM'd me on Instagram and just said, hey, I'm in the studio with your dad. And I said, how's he doing? And he says, he looks great, sounds great, you know, whatever. I said, okay, cool. So that was the thing that kind of planted the seed, that I knew he was still recording and he was still doing his stuff. And that was like the first kind of little step that it took. And then it went to, you know, him writing the book and all these other things. But the book had already started by the time we got back together.
So you mentioned in this story when Terry Lewis came into your life.
Yeah.
Can you take us through the origin story of that relationship and sort of like the super friends of Jimmy Jam's life? Because you guys are connected to so many people. Can you start putting together that Minneapolis music family tree for us?
Yeah, it's a pretty big tree, man. But yeah, so Terry and I met in at a program called Upward Bound, and we were in junior high school at the time. And I remember, and I literally, Kool and the Gang, who's going in the Rock Hall in a couple of weeks, which I'm really happy about. But Kool and the Gang was kind of the thing that brought us together, because Terry was sitting. We had dorms. We were basically staying on the University of Minnesota campus, which was great as teenagers. I don't know how our parents let us do that, but it was cool. But we're sitting there, and Terry's sitting on his bed playing this red, black, and green bass, and he's playing Kool and the Gang. And I remember just looking at him and going, I got to get to know this brother. Right? So then later on, he saw me playing piano in this kind of lunchroom where they had stored a bunch of pianos. And allegedly, I had a bunch of girls around me. I don't know, remember that part. But anyway, he said, I got to get to know that brother. So at the end of that program, we put together a little band. Jelly Bean Johnson was actually the drummer, who's the drummer at the time. And myself, well, that's why Terry didn't need a drummer, though, because he was like, I don't need a drummer. I got a drummer. I play keyboards. So I played keyboards and stuff. And we actually went and stole my dad's keyboard so that I could play. That was a funny thing. He had it set up somewhere. I stole it. We played. Anyway, that was how we met. We got into separate bands, and then we used to do Battle of the Bands all the time. I had a band called Mind and Matter. It was kind of a Philadelphia-style singing group. Terry had a band called Flight Time, and Flight Time was like P-Funk, like Funkadelic, like crazy stuff, right? And we do these Battle of the Bands. Sometimes my band would win, sometimes his band would win. But I'd always look at Terry and I'd just go, I need to join that brother. Like, we need to just be together. So we were friends, but we were competitors at the same time. And when we finally joined each other, and when we got in the time, when the time actually formed, that was the thing that really bonded us for life.
And did Morris Day bring you guys together? Did he select you both?
Well, no. So what happened was, Morris had written a song with Prince called Party Up. And it was for the Dirty Mind album, which just celebrated, I think, an anniversary here in the last couple of days. And so Prince, to thank Morris, he said, listen, Morris, I'll either give you, I don't know, 50 grand or whatever it was for the song, or I'll get you a record deal. And Morris said, well, I'll take the record deal. And so Prince said, okay, cool. And so Morris then, who was in another band called the Enterprise Band of Pleasure, which is a great name for a Morris Day band, he basically came over to our band, which was already together, Flight Time, and he just said, hey, Prince is going to get me a record deal, but I need a band. I want you guys to be the band. So Morris was the one that brought us, basically took us to Prince and said, "This is going to be the band."
And it was Morris Day and The Time at that point.
Yeah, well, it was just called The Time.
The Time.
It was just
Got it.
called The Time. But Morris was obviously the lead singer. And it was funny because and actually Morris was a drummer. What people don't know is Morris was actually a drummer, a killer drummer. And at the very beginning, Morris was going to be the drummer and Jelly Bean was actually going to be out the group. And we were trying to figure out how can we get Jelly Bean into the group. Well, luckily, a gentleman named Alexander O'Neal came along. And Alexander O'Neal at a dinner where Prince is kind of proposing what he wants to do, put the band together and everything. And Alexander O'Neal, who always talks in the third person, goes, Prince, this record deal and all that is kind of cute. But, Alexander O'Neal, I need some paper. And Prince said, what are you talking about, paper? He said, I need some paper. I need a car. I need a crib. Alexander O'Neal, whatever. And then he gets a steak and starts eating it. And Prince just walks out. Prince and Morris walk out, and we think, oh, man, we just blew the deal, right? And Prince, a week later or whatever, he calls Terry, and he just goes, Alexander O'Neal is out. Jelly Bean's the drummer. Morris is the lead singer. And meet me at such and such for practice. And that was it.
That was the call.
And that was the call. And we said to Alex, though, Alex, if we make it, we're going to come back and grab you, And one night, Clarence Avon set us up with this singer that wasn't very good. We were producing at this point. And we went to Alex, and he was playing in a club. And we went and we said, hey, man, come to the studio real quick, sing these songs. And it was like, If You Were Here Tonight, and all these songs, right? He just sang them. We sent it to Clarence, and he said, who's singing on these songs? We said, Alexander O'Neal. He said, what is he, Irish? I said, no. He said, what kind of name is O'Neal for a black man? I said, I don't know, Clarence. I said, he's a black dude. And so we went, we took him to L.A., and Clarence signed him on the spot, and the rest is history.
It worked out for
Alex.
Wow.
So it all worked out. God's plan.
So
God's plan.
how close were you with Prince? I mean, obviously you came up a little bit later. He was already, Dirty Mind is out. These records were already out
Yeah.
when you guys started making your run in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
How close did you guys become in as far as working or?
Well, my origin with Prince actually goes back to junior high also,
Right.
because we were in a piano class together. We both could play, but it was basically a way to get out of class for an hour, right? And so the music teacher would give us, like, Mary Had a Little Lamb or something like that. And she'd go, learn this song. And we go, okay. And while the teacher was in there, we were like, gah, gah, gah. And as soon as she left, we were like, ah, like we were playing. And because my dad played, I could play. I was a good player. But Prince's dad also played. Prince's dad was a jazz player.
And that's so in the movie Purple Rain where you see that's a real thing.
That's absolutely a thing. Absolutely a thing. So we both could play keyboard really well. The thing that happened that was interesting, though, was when at the end of the year they were going to do like a play or something, and they said, who wants to be in the band? And we all raised our hands, and they said, okay, Prince, what do you want to play? And he said, guitar. And I looked at him like, guitar?
He wanted to be a
Wow,
rock star.
didn't know that.
Yeah.
And then they said, Jimmy, what do you want to play? And I said, drums. And Prince looked at me like, drums? Didn't know you played. So anyway, we got in the band together. We did our thing. I remember Prince walked in with his guitar. He plugged it in. There was a song called Make Me Smile by Chicago. And the guitar player in Chicago, Terry Kath was his name. Amazing dude, right? Prince plugs in, plays this thing note for note on the guitar. And I'm like going, damn. So then we
What
took.
grade are you in at this time?
This is 8th grade, probably 7th, 8th grade.
Yeah.
So 13-ish.
Yeah. And so, anyway, I go to the bathroom. We take a break. I go to the bathroom. I hear somebody on the drums stirring it up. I'm figuring it's the music teacher, right? I walk out. It's Prince on the drums, killing it. And he hands me the sticks back, and I'm like, dude, like he was such a genius, man. So that's where we met. And then I actually auditioned for his band at one point. I didn't get the job. Dr. Fink got the job. Who should have got the job? Because he's a better player than me. But then in the time, we were rivals, but we saw each other every single day. He'd come to our rehearsal for 6 hours a day and rehearse us. Then he'd go rehearse The Revolution for 6 hours. And then he'd go to the studio all night. And then he'd come back to our rehearsal with a cassette and he'd go, I did this last night. And he'd put it in and be like 1999 or some crazy record, right? So his work ethic, that's the thing I learned the most from Prince. was just the work ethic. You know,
So the basketball
crazy.
thing is real.
The basketball thing is totally real.
So the
that dude could
what
play,
about the
man.
pancakes thing and the all of those jokes about him making pancakes and having people over to the house?
Yeah,
and-
that's all. That's all true.
But
That's all absolutely true.
What I'm fascinated by is the storyline of the movie Purple Rain.
Yeah.
And the real life relationship between him and the time
Yeah.
is bizarre to me because like the art imitated life or life imitated art, and there really was this rivalry.
Absolutely.
But y'all were like under him at the same time.
Yeah.
Can you like explain what that dynamic was? Because it sounds confusing on the outside.
Okay, so Purple Rain was kind of it was sort of a fictional account of the competitiveness of the Twin Cities, Minneapolis and St. Paul growing up. Like literally there was a scene where I think they said, we got room for 3 bands. There's 4 bands. We only got room for 3 bands at the club, right? That's how it was in Minneapolis. You couldn't play, if you were a black band, there was only a couple of clubs that you could play at. The white clubs were all, everybody was white playing R&B music, but they wouldn't let black people come in and play, right? So anyway, that's what kind of Purple Rain was. It was kind of showing the competitiveness between bands, and you had to be the best band in order to get the gigs. That was the total truth. And we were rivals. I mean, we were friends, but we were rivals back in that same time period.
So there wasn't animosity. There was just rivalry.
I would say rivalry. Yeah, I don't think it was animosity. The funny thing was Prince. I'll never forget this one night. So Morris's jacket that he wears on the first 2 album covers,
the smoking jacket.
the smoking
Yeah,
jacket,
yeah.
right? We called that the Presley. That was what we just called it, the Presley, right? So after the first tour, Morris wore that every single night because Prince was very much marketing-wise brand. You know, he was a branding guy back before that was a word, right? He was like, you got to wear that jacket because when people see you, you got to look like the album cover, right? So after the second album, literally there was a seamstress that would like have to re-sew the jacket every single night because it was like literally falling apart. And I remember Morris went to Prince and he said, Prince, I need a new Presley. And Prince is like, no, you got to stay with the original or whatever. So Morris just goes and gets his own Presley. And one night, I can't remember what city it was, we kicked Prince's ass. Like we kicked his ass. He just had I don't know that he had an off night or we just had an on night. And I remember after it, he comes backstage and he's like, yeah, you guys, I was good tonight or whatever. And he goes, yeah. And so Jerome had a new Presley in a garment bag, right? And so Morris goes, yeah. And you know what else, Prince? And he goes, Jerome. And Jerome unzips the thing and he holds it up and he says, I got a new Presley. What? And Prince goes running out the room. He said, I created a monster. And he ran out the room. So he was like, Prince really, he did.
Y'all
He
was living
created
in a movie, man.
He created the monster.
Yeah, y'all was living in a movie. Y'all was making movies, living in a movie. Yeah. So when you talk about rivalries, when you talk about Prince and MJ, was there a dislike or was it just competitive?
I don't even, from my point of view, it wasn't even competitive in the sense that they just were not compatible in the way that they worked together.
Got it.
But Prince was a huge Michael fan.
He enjoyed the music.
He loved the music. He was a
And
Michael
Mike's
Jackson
work
fan.
ethic is crazy too.
Oh, totally. I mean, I feel so blessed to be able to have worked with both of them, but they're totally different. Prince was very spontaneous. Like when we would go in the studio, we'd start at the beginning of the day. By the end of the day, there'd be a song done, mixed, totally done. That was the way that Prince worked. Michael literally, I remember we did a song with him called Tabloid Junkie on the History album. And it was a simple song. And we were like, we went in to mix it. We get it done. Michael goes, yeah, it sounds really good. Just make me a cassette. Turn up the claps. Okay, we turn the claps up. And so next day we come back. How's it sound, Mike? Sounds really good. Can we turn the claps up a little more? Yeah. Can you make me a cassette? We're like, okay. And literally 3 or 4 days of making him a cassette of claps turning up. It's like, Michael, can we finish the song? Like, we're done, you know? But that was Michael. He was very meticulous about every little thing. But if you think about the school of Michael, it came from, obviously, the Funk Brothers back in the Motown days.
Right. James
Went
Jamerson
to
and all of them.
James Jamerson and all those guys. Went to Gamble and Huff in the show you the way to go era. And then Quincy Jones.
Perfectionists.
Right. But Quincy was, the interesting thing about Quincy, somebody pointed this out to me. because there was a keyboard part that I did on one of the songs, and I remember the first take I thought that was the take. Michael had me do like 5 or 6 takes, and I remember I was trying to get to the basketball game or something, and I'm like, Michael, I got to go to the game. And he said, oh, you're just like my brothers. I always trying to go to the basketball game. I said, okay, cool. I told the guy, the other keyboard player he had, I said, did you hear it? He said, yeah, the first take. And I said, yeah, okay. But Michael Quincy would know each take. He would go, yeah, 2 minutes track 2, at 4 minutes track 3, like he knew all the best parts and he could put it in his head and then do it. Michael would procrastinate so much that you never would get anything done. You'd have 6 great parts, but he couldn't quite ever make the decision, and that was the difference between him and Quincy. So he learned
but them
doing
together
that.
was the magic, because Quincy
Them
could get
together
him into
was
the.
Well, because
Yes,
and Prince is
yes.
almost his own Quincy.
Prince was his own Quincy, and Prince could see. The thing is, Prince could play all the instruments, so he could go in and by himself. He didn't have to think about it. He didn't have to really communicate with anybody. And at a certain point, he built his own studio. Ray Parker, Jr., actually helped him build his own studio in his house, so that he didn't even need an engineer or anything. He could do everything himself. And that's the difference. Whereas Michael had a team of people around him, but Michael on the demos, if you ever hear Michael Jackson demos, he sings every part. He just wasn't the musician to play it.
That's right.
But he could sing every part that he wanted somebody to play. So they were each great in their own way. And like I say, I just feel so blessed to be able to have worked with both of them.
So how do we get to 1986? Janet Jackson has made an album, right? And,
Yeah.
and historically, people don't look back on the stuff pre-Control that often. But Janet was,
I got that album
She
for
had
my
two.
birthday.
She had 2 albums.
yeah, she had a couple albums already
The
out.
Red Scooter album. I got. What was that called? The album where she was on the Red Scooter on the.
I'm thinking of the other one that's just called Janet Jackson. With
Yeah,
her.
the first one was Janet Jackson, and the
Where she was
second
in the
one
water,
was
right?
Where she's in the water.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That was the very first one.
So people kind of forget those albums because obviously the history you guys made with Control. But how did we get to the point where she is now coming to Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, and you guys are kind of helping take control of this project?
Well, once again, just the connections. So Janet was a huge. Well, first of all, let me go back to the very first Janet album. One of the first people that put us in a studio when we went to L.A., when Terry and I went to L.A., was Leon Silvers III. Okay. And Leon Silvers III did all the Solar records back in the day, the Shalimar records, the Whispers records, all those records. So he put us in the studio and just let us create. You know, he gave us just carte blanche and just said, go in the studio and just make records. So we were able to do that, which was really pivotal for us at that point in time. But then also, the other thing that happened was Janet was a huge Time fan. So she came to our concert. And Prince never let us play. We never played Madison Square Garden, and we never played the Forum in L.A., which were the 2 best arenas, right? Because back in the day, there's no internet or anything, so everything was newspapers, right? So the New York Times and the L.A. Times, our reviews from around the country, we were kicking Prince's ass in all the reviews, right? He didn't want that to be in the L.A. Times and the New York Times, so he didn't let us play those big venues. So I remember I think we played maybe Radio City Music Hall on our own here, and I can't remember where we played. Oh, in L.A., we played Long Beach Arena, and that's where Janet saw us. She was sitting in the front row with her mom, and afterwards she came back and we met, and she was so cool. And then we went to the studio and actually watched her record with Leon. So that was kind of the connection. Leon was kind of the thing that brought us together, but also her being fans of the time. So after she was getting ready to do her 3rd album, John McClain, who was the A&R person at A&M Records at the time, there was another artist we were supposed to do. She didn't want to work with us for whatever reason. And he said, man, I'm really embarrassed, man. Is there anybody else on the roster you'd like to work with? We said, send the roster up. Now, this is, once again, before internet, so there's a fax machine, right? So he faxes the roster up. Terry and I look at it. We go down. Our fingers both stop at Janet's name, and we go, we want to do Janet. And he goes, okay, cool. He said, a couple songs? And we said, no, we want to do the whole album. And he was like, really? We said, yeah. He said, okay. How should we do it? I said, she's got to come to Minneapolis. No bodyguards, no of the things she's used, no limos. We're going to get her a car to drive, get her no GPS now, remember this. I know this is
give her
all
some
foreign to
maps.
people. We gave her a Thomas guide. We said, here's the hotel, here's the studio, here's the pizza place, here's the Blockbuster Video, or whatever. It's like, these are the places you need to get to. So the whole idea of her kind of growing up on Control was first do the conversations that we had about that was where she was at in her life, but also she was growing up because she had to drive her own self and she had to get her own self around. She had a girlfriend that came with her, and that was it. And so that we really just documented what was happening in her life at that point and asked her what her opinion was on the songs. Well, we showed her the first lyrics to Control when I was 17. I did what people told me, did what my father said, let my mother mold me.
Yeah.
We showed her those lyrics because she didn't think we were working. She just thought we were hanging out. And I said, no. And we showed her the lyrics, and she said, this is what we've been talking about. We said, yeah. And she said, well, we're just going to write about what we talk about? Yes. And she said, oh, I want to talk about this and I want to talk about that. So it was like the light bulb and the creative thing went off. And that was the thing. And she was ready to be an artist at that point because she was kind of a actress and she was doing a whole lot of other
Penny.
things. She was Penny, yeah. And I think the singing part
She
was
also
really her dad.
Charlene too on Different Strokes.
Yeah, that's right.
Don't never forget.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Never.
You certainly.
That's
yeah.
right.
Never forget.
That's right.
Yeah. Different strokes for real.
But the thing we noticed about her was, in talking about those first couple of albums, was when she was young, like she was on the Jackson's Variety Show, she was on the Sonny and Cher show, she was on all these variety shows all the time, and she had all this attitude, like she was always just like, you know. But then when she made her albums, the albums were both kind of like that, and we were like, where's that attitude? So that's why on Control we wanted to make tracks that were so aggressive and so like loud and funky because we wanted to get that
What have you
attitude
done
back.
for me lately?
Yeah.
Nasty.
Yeah. And what have you done for me lately? Actually, John McClain, I mentioned his name earlier, but I'll mention him again. He was the one that actually led to that song. Because, you know, A&R people, their thing is, I just need one more. I just need one more. And we had played him Control and Nasty, and we played him all the songs, right? He's like, I just need one more. We said, no, man. So anyway, he heard a song we were working on for our album, for a Jam and Lewis album. And he said, that's the track that Janet needs. We're like, what are you talking about? He said, play it for her. If she likes it, give it to her. We said, okay. So we played it for her. And she said, who's that for? And we said, well, you if you want it. That was the track to What Have You Done For Me Lately.
What do you consider to be the crown jewel of Control?
Ooh. I couldn't even say. I couldn't tell you. I think they're all in their own way. It all works
What's the
together.
biggest one? What was the most successful? There's so many singles. Those couple of Janet albums, those first two with you guys.
Yeah.
There's like 8 singles on each one. The whole album became singles.
Well, you got Control, obviously.
Yeah.
But the biggest two, according to this, are Nasty and When I Think of You.
So I think When I Think of You is, to me, the ultimate.
But that Pleasure Principle video,
yeah.
listen,
The video for Pleasure Principle to me is the biggest video
Yeah.
off the album.
play
Yeah.
around.
Well, okay, video-wise, Control's the biggest video.
Oh, it is?
Because I'm in it. So, but no. When I Think of You, what's interesting was I remember when the album was done and we went and played the album. Michael wasn't there, but all the other brothers were. And we went to, I think it was Jackie's house. He had a studio in his house. And they wanted to hear the record. So we played it. And I remember after we played everything, I think it was Marlon maybe who said, that one song's going to be number one. And we said, which one? Yeah, what have you done for me lately? He said, no. We said, Nasty? He said, no. I said, what did it sound like? He said, it started off with piano. Bing, bing. And we said, When I Think of You? He said, yeah. And they all said, oh, yeah, that's the one. That's the one. And we were like, what? We didn't think of it like that. And so I remember when they did a double platinum party at A&M Records, and she released the video for When I Think of You. And I remember it was the first pop number one. Because Lately and Nasty both went number one on the R&B charts.
Oh.
But I think Lately got to 4 and Nasty got to 3. So we were on pop charts. So we were trending up. But When I Think of You was the home run.
Outta here.
That was the home run. That was the one that brought it all in. And so, yeah, When I Think of You was probably the most successful.
My joint is
single.
Let's Wait a While.
Yeah.
Let's Wait a While.
That's a hammer, too.
So now we're in the Janet zone, but there's the New Edition work.
Yeah.
There's the Bobby Brown work. You guys did Any Heartbreak, right?
Yeah.
On that album.
Any Heartbreak, yeah.
You guys did Don't Be Cruel.
No, that's
You didn't
LA
do-
Babyface.
That's LA Babyface. What'd you
Yes,
do
sir.
for Bobby?
The only thing we did with Bobby was when they did the reuniting album, the Home Again album.
Right, the Home Again
we did,
album.
Yeah,
Got
that's
it.
what we work with Bobby.
And then as far as a songwriter and a musician, because you guys are songwriters also
Mm-hmm.
and musicians, when you listen to where music is at today, right? only and I'm asking this just because hopefully there's a young person, a young songwriter, young artist watching, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the hearing that your father is an established blues musician and has this anthology that people, Cornbread Harris, the anthology you can go listen to, and then Deeper Blues, the book. For black music in America, the connection between blues, R&B, right, and just song structure and the gospel influence and all of the influence that black Americans have brought into music, is there a way that you could articulate how you go about writing songs and those like changes and B sections and choruses and things like that? Because I feel like some of those ways of writing music have fallen by the wayside. And so you don't have records get popular, but like we're sitting here today, records don't necessarily, R&B records don't have the same staying power that it felt like they had in the 80s and 90s.
Well, it's a complicated question.
Yeah.
And the answer is probably a little complicated too. But the first thing I will say is one of the things to me that made music back in the day, and when I met, and I'll, first of all, let me start off with when you talk about the song structures of things. I grew up a pop music kid because in Minneapolis, there was no really black radio. There was a sun up to sundown station that you had to twist your antenna funny to even get it. It was an AM station. So all of my influences growing up, if they weren't being played on pop radio, I mean, some things like James Brown and things like that were being played on pop radio. But it was like Seals and Crofts in America and the Carpenters and Bread and like stuff like that. That was my influence. Terry's influence was, because he started in Omaha, Nebraska before he came to Minneapolis, but he had relatives in Chicago and stuff. So his thing was New Birth and Tower of Power and Earth, Wind and Fire and that. So our writing style was the kind of the combination of those two things. So there was the traditional writing of bridges and modulations and all of the things you talked about, chord changes and all those things. That was part of it, but the other part of it was the funk that Terry brought to it. So we always called it the funky bottom and the pretty top, right? Those kind of the combinations.
Kind of the
things.
juxtaposition of the two.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So I think that's what made it unique, our writing style and stuff. But the other thing is a lot of the music now is loop-based, meaning that when you hear a bar of music and you just now repeat that same bar of music for 3 minutes or whatever it is, you've heard the whole song in the first 30 seconds. You know exactly what the song is.
That's why songs are 90 seconds now.
Yeah.
2 minutes.
Yes,
Whatever. Yeah.
because you've heard it now. If you think about, once again, I'll say like Earth, Wind, and Fire is a Kool and the Gang. So people back in the day, those were bands. So there might be a part that only happens one time in the song. There might be your favorite little bass lick or your favorite little line that they sing or whatever. And that to me is what made it beautiful because the songs actually traveled. They actually had a journey. There was a beginning, there was a middle, and an end to the song, whether it faded out or whatever that was. And there was a certain beauty to it, and it was also the beauty of collaboration. Because you can sit at your computer and basically do everything yourself, it's coming from one mind. And there's people that can do it really well, but if you think about the idea of, it's like my analogy is always like a slam dunk contest, right? It's cool to see a slam dunk contest, right? And there's some pretty creative slams, but there's nothing better than in a game.
Where they've
If it's a
collaborated
steal,
on an exciting moment.
it's a
right.
steal, it's
Right.
a whatever, it's a alley-oop or whatever, that's more exciting because that's a team coming together to create that moment. And that to me is what music in some ways is missing. Although my favorite music that's out there is very collaborative. I mean, people like, I love Salt. I mean,
Salt
a lot of
is
Salt is my favorite.
Incredible.
I worked with Inflow for a month at A&M Records back in March on a bunch of projects. And he's amazing because he brings in musicians to play in a room. And he's like, come in the room and just play and let's create music. There's a band out of Houston called Khruangbin, who I absolutely love. So there's music out there that I think is actually still really, really good. And I'm excited. I love music discovery. It's the thing I love the most about social media is people that I follow also follow people that I like or will turn me on to music that I really like. So I like Inflow as a producer. He's absolutely my favorite producer. I love Khruangbin. I just saw, another UK band, Jungle. I just saw them the other night. I love them. So there's a lot of still good music out
there
there.
is, there is.
But I just think it may be a little tougher to find. But I think if for music to continue to get better, I think it's cool where people do learn instruments. I love what Her has brought, because people want to learn to play guitar. Like they see her play guitar, they see her play drums, or they see her play keyboards. I just think
It's
that's something
Prince-esque,
cool.
the energy that it
Yes.
brings. Yeah.
And I think that's cool. So I think people emulate what they see. So I think if they see musicians, they will want to be musicians. And for the longest time, we weren't necessarily seeing musicians. But I think now we're beginning to see a little more of that, and I think it's a positive thing.
This is the great Jimmy Jam. You're a legend, sir, and I appreciate
is this
knowing you in life. Every time I see him, he speaks. He knew me. Like I saw him one day, and I was like, "Oh my God, it's Jimmy Jam." He was like, "Hey, Ebro, nice." I
Yeah.
was like, "Yo."
I
He
think
watches. He
I
watches
know,
us.
and I DM'd
Yes.
you, didn't I?
Yes.
I mean, because listen, here's my thing, and I don't want to go long here, but my thing is, because I just talked about social media. Social media to me has become that place where you follow people you don't like to talk about them, right? It's like this whole negative thing, and I'm too old. I don't have time for negative. I want to reach out to people who I love what they're doing, people I admire, and I just want to let them know. That's how I met Inflow.
Right.
I DM'd him one day and I just said, "Hey, I love this new Salt record." And he's like, "Jimmy Jam?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he said, "Come to LA. I'm going to be out there, whatever." But it's the same thing, man. I love what you do,
Thank you.
and I just wanted to let you know.
No, it
Simple
was-
as that.
it
Just,
was
dude, I love what you do. Appreciate
dreams,
it.
Dreams have come true.
That's pretty
Because
remarkable.
you are, I mean, one of the greats, and we're honored to have you in the room, and we thank you
man.
for all of that you've contributed to music, man.
And I thank you for contributing to, like I said earlier, if people don't hear it, what we do, if people don't hear the music, it doesn't exist. So thank you for making the music exist in people's lives.
There it is. Give it up, Jimmy Jam.
Thanks, Jimmy, man.
Go check out Deeper Blues with him and Dad, and also the anthology of Cornbread Harris. Yes.